Welcome back, CSE 235, to exercise 4D. And I apologize if I ever say 4B. For some reason, I keep saying 4B. It's 4D, and this is part 3. And we're just going to use a CSS animation and make this image fade. And it will not be that impressive, but we're going to learn how to do it. So right now, we just had this image display on a page by using inner HTML to actually plug in some HTML on the page with JavaScript instead of just having it and have its opacity be 0 and then turn it to 1, which you can do. But we're going to have this appear on the page and have it fade in just to be a little more dramatic. And we already disabled the button so that you can't keep adding things to it. And there's other things we could do to make it so the function stops, but that was the easiest one. I always like going easiest first. What's the easiest thing to make this function not keep going? Disable the button. Is there any downside to disabling the button? Not really. You're showing your list. How many more times do you need to show it? So we're going to take a look at CSS animations. I'm just going to CSS, scrolling down, advanced, under advanced, CSS, here we go. CSS animation. I don't know why it's in that order, but anyway, CSS animations, and here's some animations here, and you could change positions and all kinds of things. So there's all this kind of stuff here. So obviously there's a lot more cooler things we're going to do than just fade in. But we're going to do a fade in because we'll start easy. I always like to start easy. We're going to have to use this at keyframes property. So we're going to go down here, and you could read about this stuff if you're not familiar with them. I haven't done this very much other than just kind of hovering and stuff. But they have this at keyframes rule. So it's in CSS. This is part of CSS. It's at keyframes, and I'll basically just simplify it for you. There's two parts to it. You set up this at keyframes rule. This thing that says example, that's kind of like a function name. So it's at keyframes, and this is what you're calling it. So you could call it whatever. You could call it fade in. We'll call it fade in. But notice down here they use the same name. So then you apply it to whatever element or div or ID you're using. So you kind of define it and then you apply it. It's almost like using a function and then running the function or calling the function. So, or defining a style and applying the style. So we're kind of making this, or if you think about when we use that at font or whatever with Google Fonts, sometimes we set up the font properties and then we apply it to a part of CSS. So it's kind of like that, but we have to give it a name, and then we also have to give it kind of its start and end. Now, I've been trying to look. I don't see a lot of information about this, but some of them say from and to, and some of them use these percents, and they are part of the code. And I've kind of experimented. Can you say anything? Can you just put start, end? And you can't. It doesn't work. So we could either use from to, or in our case, we could just use 0% to 100%, because that's the fade that we're going to do. So we can just kind of go from there. So what I'm going to do is just kind of copy this code here, and then you just do animation name. So let me copy this code. The animation, I'll even copy the part that says the animation code. And I'll copy that because it already has a comment, a CSS comment, and I'll go back. Now we're going to do this in the CSS. So we'll go here. And now I don't know if this has to be in front of that. We'll see. But we're not going to change the color, so let me get rid of this stuff. Now you don't have to keep it on one line like that if you don't want to. But one thing you want to be aware of is, just like a media query, there's an opening curly brace and a closing, and then these have curly braces. So you could keep it on one line if you want. Now I'm going to change this to 0% and change this to 100%. And then the property change we're going to do, instead of just like background color red, background color, we could just do opacity. I don't know if they have examples here where they show opacity. I don't think they do, but we're just going to use opacity. Yeah, I'm not seeing examples with opacity. They're all with color, but we're going to use opacity because we're going to do a fade in. So we'll go here, and just like a regular CSS, we're going to do opacity, which is a property of CSS, and a colon, and we'll just do 0. They don't do 0 pixels or 0% anything, just 0. That's it. And then the 100%, it's just going to be opacity, and they just use 1. They don't use 100, they use 1. So it goes from 0 to 1. So if something was 50%, it would be 0.5. And there's no unit after that. So that's all we need. It's going from 0 to 1. And that's all you have to set up with that. Now, we're not going to use the name example. We'll just call it fade in. And you could put a capital I in there if you want, or keep it all lowercase. So that's fade in. Now, that's the first part of it. Now, let me go back here, and I'll go back to the one I was looking at. Now, when it's being used, they have animation name and animation duration. You could just add that right to the style. So I'll just copy that, and I'll put it in this figure pic. And I'll just paste that, and I'll tab this over. And animation name is going to be fade in, so that should be the same as this. And then animation duration, you can make it longer if you want. If you want to make it, 6 seconds or something. And like I said, there was an issue where if you let the page sit there, it kind of goes away. So I didn't address that yet, but let's see if this works. So again, we're floating right. We have a margin right of 40%. I don't have any margin left right now. I did that originally, but we're kind of pushing it from the right, pushing away from the edge on the right. So again, this applies the keyframes animation, and this is how we're setting it up. So let's see if this works. I'm just going to go up here, and I'm going to refresh it. Okay, that's good. There's nothing on the page. We should show a list here, and then we should show our image. Now, I'm talking here while this page is loaded, so we may not see our fade in because I spent so long talking. But let me just see. There it goes. So we didn't see a fade in. Let's refresh it and hit the button. Okay, now we see a fade in. But the fade in seems to start when the page loads. So I haven't addressed how to deal with that yet. If you want to look up or if you want to troubleshoot to figure out how that works, you can do that. Now eventually the float will go away and this will go on top, which probably is okay. Without doing any media queries or anything, that kind of is okay. But we refresh it, we hit show movies, and the image fades in. Now we don't have anything else. We didn't add anything exciting. We're just pushing it with a float to the edge. But that's all I wanted to do with this because I don't want to keep working with this. We're going to do some other stuff, so I don't want to keep working on this same little exercise we've been doing to go over a loop. But we did build on a loop, and we now used a button and a function, and now we use some animations, and we put an image in there. So we're kind of doing some a little more complex stuff and troubleshooting as we go. And again, the only thing that's not working well is if you wait, it doesn't fade in. I tried some things already, but if you have some ideas, that's fine. You could troubleshoot that. So this is all the CSS we should need here for our image. And just to review, in our HTML, what did we do? We made a figure element, and we gave it an ID of pic so we could plug our HTML for the image in there. And we already had our button, and we already had an ID for movies, which is our list. That gets plugged in there from the previous exercise. We have our picture, which I made around 300 pixels. And then for our JavaScript, we didn't need a whole lot. We just needed a couple lines. We disabled our button, so at the end of the function, it disables the button so it doesn't keep running the function again and putting more text on the page. And then really just 2 lines of JavaScript. We could have gotten away with just 1 line of JavaScript. We could have put this whole thing, this whole quote right here, but that makes it really long. So I split it up, made a variable called image URL, and then put the URL in a single quote because we have double quotes here, and then we just kind of inner HTML is that variable, so it's just going to plug that into the pic ID, and that's it. And again, it should just work like this. Ooh, very scary. And that's about it. So that's 4D, and hopefully that'll be the end of our 4. We'll move on to something else with that. So that's exercise 4D. List pic with animation. Animation wasn't that impressive, but maybe we'll do more with animations as we work. So enjoy that one.